Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News on the South Florida Conservative News Center. It is Wednesday, June 3rd, around 11 a.m., and a number of primary elections are going on around the country that will reshape the political landscape. In and among those, there are, of course, issues going on with the U.S. Senate and its continuing war against President Trump and the MAGA policies. And unfortunately, due to the opposition being mostly inside of the party, the news gets to have a field day where it says Republicans push back or this or that or the other thing. And it's very disingenuous, not on the part of the news people, but on the part of the quote unquote Republicans. So let's talk about the important thing going into the midterm elections. Who are the Republicans who are opposing Trump's restitution fund? And why we're going to deal with this one is they are the same people that are opposing the Save America Act, and they are trying to trade one for the other and things like that. And, as of our publication, who knows? Trump could have bailed out for one in favor of the other. He wants Save America, but he also has firm standing on the restitution fund. And before you girls get all upset about it, there has been and will be more evidence that the United States government under Joe Biden or under Barack Obama, whoever was in charge, did weaponize law enforcement, the IRS, and various other federal agencies to hunt down and persecute, not prosecute, persecute elements of the Trump, I guess, monolith, we could say, because it wasn't just the January 6 people. If you take them out of the equation, which you shouldn't because of the fucking travesty of justice that occurred versus them versus every other protester that was going on in the country, including those that murdered people and burnt down cities. We're also talking about people who were supporters or confidants. Trump's own bookkeeper, who was in his late 70s or 80s, was a sickly man, was going to be sent up to Rikers Island to teach him a lesson. So they were giving that man a death sentence, completely across the board, out of control. And when you're now seeing this coverage of President Trump's proposed $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund, you have to notice the recurring pattern here, which is headlines routinely describe the controversy as Republican senators demanding answers or Republicans opposing Trump's fund. They are also the same Republicans who are opposing things in Iran, the same ones that are opposing things that are done in the financial policies, blah, blah, blah. Factually, it is true on paper. Politically, however, it obscures a more important question: which Republicans and what is a Republican, right? The answer matters because modern Republican politics is no longer operating under the assumptions that governed the party before 2016. For most of the last century, or last half century, journalists could safely treat Senate leadership, the committee chairman, and long-serving incumbents as representative of the Republican Party. They were doing the Republican thing. Now, today, that assumption is incredibly questionable. The Republican parties, especially if you saw the shenanigans of Mitch McConnell, Senator Thune, Cronin, all these other guys versus Trump from Trump's first administration, and now especially in the second one. The Republican Party's electoral center of gravity has shifted toward the populist coalition built around Donald Trump. Now, whether one supports that movement or opposes it, its dominance within Republican primary politics is difficult to ignore. The GOP may wish to withhold money. They may wish to do whatever. They may wish to strangle these MAGA types on the vine, but things are changing if one just looks at the Republicans that have lost office in primaries. These total shitbags, traitors to the party and traitors to the country, in some cases, have been ousted by more populist type of candidates. But we'll worry about that a little bit later on. So if you look at through that lens, the controversy surrounding the restitution fund looks less like a revolt by Republicans and more like resistance from a particular faction within the Republican Party, the Bushes, the Mitch McConnells, people of that nature. So we have the missing context here, which is the Associated Press, bastion of truth, and other outlets frequently describe senators such as Bill Cassidy, Sue Collins, John Thune, Lisa Murkowski, and others simply as Republicans. What is often left unsaid is many of these figures have spent years in various degrees of conflict with Trump and the movement that he has led, let alone their contrary votes to things that would have helped to increase the viability of the United States as a trade nation and to stop the continuing ghettoization of our lower income classes. But the distinction is critical. If the head of the Republican Party, which right now is Donald Trump, advances a policy and opposition emerges from a small group of senators, it's a little bit bigger than a small group, but there's only how many altogether, right? There's only 100 who have long histories of disagreement with that party leader. The story is not merely Republicans oppose Trump. The story is a faction of the Republican Party opposes Trump. You don't see that in the news that way because it makes it sound like he is out there alone. The news lens is always Trump is alone. He's got his fanatics out on the street and he's doing his game, which is more mirrored by the Democrat parties with their armed goon squads that are operating at will in democratically controlled states. I don't have to show you any examples. You probably know of 14 or 15 off the top of your head. So these are very different narratives. Now here's one, Bill Casey. The most obvious example, I'm sorry, Bill Cassidy. I'm thinking of somebody else. No senator better illustrates the problem than Bill Cassidy. Cassidy voted to convict Trump during the second impeachment trial and was subsequently censured by the Louisiana Republican Party, right? More recently, he suffered a primary defeat after facing a Trump-backed challenger. Boom, out with the trash. AP itself has reported on Cassidy's deteriorating relationship with Republican primary voters. He was out of touch with his constituents. He was doing swamp things, and the swamp people, meaning the people from the Louisiana area, not saying in a derogatory way because there's a TV show, decided to turn on him and kick his ass out, right? Yet when Cassidy opposes the restitution fund, he is presented merely as a Republican senator raising concerns, not as a long-term Trump enemy, right? So he's technically accurate, but the story is politically incomplete because that is the truth. You know, the truth is the man, just as I said, look it up for yourself. From a populist perspective, Cassidy is not representative of where Republican primaries voters have moved. He is representative of an older institutional faction that has steadily lost influence over the decades. The old Republican Party of guys like him and McConnell and the rest were that team that plays the Harlem Globetrotters. You lose every night, but you still get paid. You still have your little cookie jar, and you were happy to let the socialists whip you as long as you could stay in your cookie jar. But in the meantime, the socialists weren't worried about shaking down ExxonMobil for a couple bucks. They were worried about taking over the country, which is why I am rather perturbed with them. And also with guys like Cassidy and guys like John Thune, him and his institutional wing, right? John Thune has presented a much more complicated case. We did an article about Thune because he's a company man, piece of garbage, a long time ago. We knew he was going to be an issue. He is still an issue. In fact, he is a dangerous issue to stop the Save America Act because of his position in the Senate. Unlike Cassidy, because Thune's passive aggressive, Thune has not made opposition in public to Trump a defining feature of his political identity. Yet he is widely regarded as the institutional Senate figure. And when they say institutional Senate figure, they mean business as usual Senate figure, Tammany Hall style Senate figure, whose primary concern is maintaining legislative functionality and conference unity. And let me ask you this, and I don't like to usually get off this side of it. How many laws or anything, positive laws, positive codes of this or that or the other thing, repeal of dangerous laws and things like that, has the United States Congress done since Trump? Even during the 2016, because everything had to be done outside of making it a law so you could deny it. There had to be plausible deniability. Now you're still operating that way, but Thune and his goons, as they are, have decided to hold things up under procedural basis. We can't have the Save America Act because of procedures. We couldn't vote during the recess because of procedures, where these things had been done historically all throughout that time. Thune has been trying to kill the majority of Trump's mandate to bring back the United States as a viable country, not just as a source of income to fund this taxpayer operated socialist structure, right? So what you're going to have here was this dispute over the restitution fund highlights the distinction, as I said, with these two. Thune reportedly urged the administration to abandon the fund in order to advance immigration legislation and remove a politically controversial obstruction. They are conflating different issues into one bill specifically so that they can then turn around and cut one of them out. So from an institutional perspective, that position is understandable. From a populist perspective, it raises a different question. Why is Senate procedural convenience, which is what it is, taking precedent over a policy initiative supported by the president and his political coalition and is shown to be a typically viable thing? Why? Because I guess if you wanted to go into particulars, the last time we did that was not just the Red Scare, because that was in some cases true, but Japanese internment. So they're going to say we didn't do anything for the Japanese, so tough shit for the Americans. But they aren't even using any historical aspects like that. And that is part of the problem here. The larger issue is representation. Journalists frequently assume that Senate Republicans speak for the Republican Party because they occupy positions of authority within Congress. But electoral politics increasingly suggests a different reality. The Republican voters have repeatedly rewarded candidates aligned with Trump. Go look it up. It's happening right now, while punishing many who, like Cronin, who position themselves in opposition. And these guys are directly in opposition. It's not like I won't sit with him at lunch. It is I am out there to bang up his problem. I'm there to make as many problems. I'm there to bang up his programs. I'm there to do all the stuff I can to hinder this. And I don't care what my voting base says, because I'm God as a senator, which is how senators are. Several prominent anti-Trump Republicans have retired. They've lost primaries or seen their influence diminish dramatically. They are, if not in open collusion with their Democratic partners, they are definitely dreaming about it on those lonely nights. So this does not mean every Republican must support every Trump initiative, nor does it mean every criticism of the restitution fund is illegitimate. What it does mean is that media organizations should be precise about describing the factions involved. You're giving these Republican senators too much gravity by saying they are Republicans. They are old school, or people used to say neocons and things like that. They are not part of the job of Republicans moving forward. They do not care about making it better for everybody. They intend, these older people, meaning the old school, the George Bush types, on allowing the inner cities to continue to be ravaged with drugs and illiteracy and poverty, because it doesn't bother them, right? They don't care about that. They don't care about real industry. They have their siphon coming from whoever, the Lehman Brothers. I can use that because I think they're all out of business. So what you have is when senators who have repeatedly diverged from the party's dominant electoral coalition oppose a White House initiative, the readers deserve to know that. And the Associated Press and Reuters will never do it. Every time you see this in the future and it says Republicans oppose, if you have the extra 10 minutes, go online and just, use any of the AIs if you wish. You could do, because most of the regular browsers now have one, and just say, is that person aligned with Trump policies? You don't say, are they in the same political party? Because it will say yes. Are they aligned with Trump policies? Have they voted against him? Or in the case of Cassidy, did you vote to try to get rid of him? Right? Those are the things that are important. I have the case here in our state in Florida with Byron Donalds, right? Versus Jay Collins. And then there's Fishback in there too. Can't not say he doesn't exist. He's a plant. He's never going to go anywhere, and that's fine. Collins and Donalds. Donalds was smart enough to get an endorsement from Trump way, way back when, hasn't had one since. He is coasting on Governor DeSantis's policies. So when he gets in, his idea is going to be to coast. He has no ideas. He's not really put in a lot of legislation on his own. He's that kind of guy. I can't say what his morals are. I don't really get on that side of it. There's people out there that'll get on it. I don't care. It has nothing to do with race. He's just been able to use that, unfortunately, as a shield from his toughest critics because he falls on that whole trip again. You don't dislike me because I'm a weak legislator and changed over from another party. You dislike me because I'm black. And that's not true in 99% of the cases, I'll say, because I don't know. There's a racist out there somewhere, right? It's Florida. We got one. Whereas, like I said, Jay Collins, very able. He's going to have issues. He supported, the MAGA. He's really supporting the MAGA movement. He's involved in the issues of the day. Involved with the Cuba thing, involved with why aren't we getting education, things of that nature. What can I do to work with the president in the future? But he has to stay away from those terms because he does not have the presidential endorsement. And this is where it gets weird. But that is not what is occurring in this situation. That's not George Bush era Republican versus MAGA Republican. You look at their records and you see what they've done of anybody like Murkowski. Jesus Christ. It's amazing that Alaska is existing. If Alaska didn't have oil, we would cut them loose. Okay. So what you're seeing here with this dispute over the weaponization fund, I'm going a little long. I'm sorry. It reveals the ongoing struggle over the brand, the Republican Party, the brand. If it was me, I would have said, F it, call ourselves something else, the Bull Moose Party, whatever you have to do. You can't do libertarian because you have too many assholes out there like Rand Paul. And I'm not even going to mention that other loser from the Congress down there, right? Out the door because it was time. People realize that you can't just go and cosplay in Congress. We need people who are going to take America serious. And the welfare of every American taxpayer and citizen has to be taken seriously. And it is too long where we have had a ruling elite and everybody else just has to suck it up. So what you're going to see more of, hopefully, outside of what I said, this traditional reporting that tends to treat the Senate institution as the center of the Republican politics, because it has to, because they align more heavily with the left. Many Republican voters see the situation in exactly the same opposite way as I am talking about. They view Trump and the populist movement as the party center, which it is. He's drawn more votes than any of these morons have. While senators such as, I said, Cassidy, Collins, Murkowski, and portions of the Senate leadership, Thune, the Turtle, and your favorite boy from South Carolina, since it's June, we'll talk about him at another date, Lindsey Graham, they remain remnants of an older Republican coalition that retains procedural power but no longer commands the majority support within the party's base. Not saying they don't have access to money. Mitch McConnell has a PAC that he has been able to do a lot with, which is why everybody must kiss the ring. So whether that assessment is correct, meaning that the oldsters are losing power because they are, or maybe they aren't, right? Because they can still screw these guys on procedure. But understanding that the divide is essential to understanding the current controversy. So when everyone tells you, oh, the Republicans are against them, not truly. The real story is not simply that Republican senators want answers. The real story is that a long-standing struggle between the Republican Party's populist majority and its institutional minority has once again surfaced, and this time through a debate over who should receive restitution for alleged government weaponization and who gets to decide the future direction of the party. So that's basically it. I know I went off on a little tangent there a couple times, but that's what more people have to parse as you are dealing, especially with older voters. They have to understand there are many facets to the Republican Party. If they like some old okey doke guy who lets the Democrats win 3 times out of 10 or 3 times out of 5, more likely, so that they themselves can retain their personal power, then continue to vote for Mitch McConnell and jerk off Company Man Thune and people like that. That's your candidate. But if you are a populist, if you are believing that you can, as they say, make America great again, then those are not your candidates. And they aren't even part of your party philosophically. So that's about it for now. Have a good day. It's raining here. Can't tell you what it is where you are. And be safe, and we'll talk to you later.